You're listening to Underground USA News.
Thursday, September 11, 2025. On September 11, 2025, Americans across the nation honored the nearly 3,000 lives lost in the September 11th terrorist attacks with heartfelt ceremonies in New York, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, reflecting on a tragedy that reshaped U.S. policy and sparked the global war on terrorism. Families, dignitaries, and first responders gathered at the National September 11th Memorial and Museum, where moments of silence and the reading of victims' names underscored the enduring grief and resilience of a nation still grappling with the event's legacy. In New York, heightened security measures were implemented due to potential terror threats targeting critical infrastructure, a stark reminder of the persistent challenges in combating terrorism. The ceremonies, marked by volunteer efforts and personal tributes, reaffirmed a commitment to remembering the fallen, while vigilance remains paramount in safeguarding the homeland. Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old founder of Turning Point USA and a prominent voice for American conservatism, was fatally shot on September 10th during a speaking engagement at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah, in what Utah Governor Spencer Cox described as a political assassination. Kirk was addressing an estimated 3,000 supporters as part of his American comeback tour when a single, high-powered shot, fired from a rooftop approximately 200 yards away, struck him in the neck. Despite heroic efforts, Kirk succumbed to his injuries, leaving behind his wife, Erica, and their 2 young children, a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. The loss of Kirk, a dynamic leader whose passionate advocacy for free speech, limited government, and traditional values galvanized millions, has left the U.S. shaken. The FBI, working closely with Utah authorities, recovered a bolt-action high-power rifle from a wooded area near the campus, believed to be the weapon used in the attack, which included ammunition branded with transgender and anti-fascist language. FBI Special Agent in Charge Robert Bowles confirmed the recovery of critical evidence, including a footwear impression, palm print, and forearm imprints, now under forensic analysis. Utah Department of Public Safety Commissioner Bo Mason noted that the suspect, described as a college-aged white male who blended in with the student crowd, arrived on campus at 11:52 a.m., accessed a rooftop via stairwells, and fled into a nearby neighborhood after the shooting. The FBI has released images of a person of interest, a tall, thin individual wearing a black long-sleeve shirt with an American flag, blue jeans, sunglasses, and a baseball cap, and is offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to the suspect's identification and arrest. Authorities have stressed that the attack was a targeted event with no ongoing threat to the public, and are leveraging extensive surveillance footage to track the suspect's movements. The assassination has drawn widespread bipartisan condemnation, with leaders denouncing the act as a vile assault on free speech and democratic discourse. President Trump, a close ally of Kirk's, announced that Kirk would posthumously receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, praising his unmatched ability to inspire America's youth and calling the shooting a grievous wound to the nation. Utah Governor Cox vowed to pursue justice relentlessly, with Cox affirming that Utah's death penalty remains a viable option for the perpetrator. Vigils at Utah's state capitol and a makeshift memorial at Turning Point USA's Phoenix headquarters reflect the profound sorrow felt by Kirk's supporters. Yet in a shameful display of opportunism, some leftist voices exploited this tragedy to push divisive narratives. Political commentator Matthew Dowd, appearing on MSNBC on September 10th, callously remarked, "Charlie Kirk's rhetoric, filled with hate speech and divisive tropes, created an environment where this kind of violence was inevitable. He bears responsibility for the climate that led to this tragedy." A statement that drew widespread criticism for blaming the victim and ignoring the broader context of rising political violence. Similarly, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, speaking to reporters later that day, stated, "Political violence, unfortunately, has been ratcheting up in this country. I think there are people who are fomenting it in this country. I think the president's rhetoric often foments it. We've seen the January 6th rioters who clearly have tripped a new era of political violence, conveniently sidestepping the twin assassination attempts against Trump in 2024 and falsely tying Kirk's death to the former president's rhetoric. These remarks, which attempt to politicize a heinous act, stand in stark contrast to the overwhelming unified call for justice. The assassination, occurring on the eve of the 24th anniversary of September 11th, has cast a somber shadow over the nation, prompting urgent calls to reaffirm the sanctity of free expression and unequivocally reject violence as a means of political discourse. The official Black Lives Matter Instagram account ignited controversy by posting a video clip from the 1983 film Born in Flames, seemingly endorsing violence in response to the August 22nd murder of Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska on a Charlotte light rail train. The clip, shared via Instagram stories, featured a character declaring, "All oppressed people have a right to violence," prompting swift backlash from conservatives who argue it glorifies lawlessness amid rising crime concerns. DeCarlos Brown, a homeless man with 14 prior arrests, fatally stabbed Zarutska, an act that has fueled debates over soft-on-crime policies in Democrat-led cities. Critics, including conservative commentators and public figures, contrast the lack of corporate media coverage of this incident with the extensive reporting on cases like Jordan Neely's death, highlighting perceived biases and failures in addressing repeat offenders. A recent report from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression paints a grim picture of free speech on American college campuses, assigning an F grade to 166 out of 257 institutions surveyed due to widespread student opposition to controversial speakers, both liberal and conservative. The survey of 68,000 students reveals a growing intolerance, with 72% at elite schools like Columbia and Boston College endorsing shouting down speakers on issues like abortion and transgender policies, and 1 in 3 students finding violence acceptable to silence speech they oppose. This alarming trend, exacerbated by administrative crackdowns under the Trump administration, signals a retreat from open discourse, undermining the critical thinking essential to a free society. While some schools like Dartmouth show improvement through revised policies, the data underscores a broader cultural shift towards censorship that conservatives warn threatens the First Amendment's vitality. An NGO investigation has uncovered what it describes as a coordinated national campaign by the Council on American Islamic Relations to introduce pro-terrorist and anti-Israel materials into U.S. public schools, extending beyond previously reported programs in Pennsylvania and Delaware to states like New Jersey, Oklahoma, Florida, and Illinois. The report alleges that CARE's educational initiatives, such as its September 11th in the Classroom guide and partnerships with groups like Teaching While Muslim, aim to sanitize the September 11th attacks and promote anti-Israel narratives, including support for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Critics, including U.S. Senator Tom Cotton, argue that CARE's ties to terrorist organizations, such as Hamas, and its history of controversial statements, like praising the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack, make its influence in schools alarming. The investigation raises concerns about CARE's partnerships with major school districts, potentially affecting thousands of students, and calls for federal scrutiny of its activities. The brutal stabbing of 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska on a Charlotte light rail train by DeCarlos Brown, a repeat offender with a history of mental illness, has ignited fierce debate over crime and media coverage. Brown, who allegedly said, "I got that white girl after the attack," has been charged with first-degree murder and faces federal charges. Yet CNN's Van Jones claimed there's no evidence of racial motive, drawing sharp criticism from conservatives who argue the media downplays such cases when victims are white. Critics, including the White House and local officials, point to Brown's 14 prior arrests as evidence of failed judicial and mental health systems, with Charlotte's mayor vowing to bolster transit security. This tragedy underscores broader concerns about urban crime and selective reporting, with many arguing that soft-on-crime policies enabled this preventable loss. A federal judge has blocked the Trump administration's policy to restrict illegal immigrants from accessing taxpayer-funded services like Head Start, health clinics, and adult education, preserving access to these programs for now. The decision, which counters efforts to prioritize American citizens for federal benefits, has sparked debate over the use of public resources. Critics argue the ruling undermines fiscal responsibility and national sovereignty, while supporters claim it protects vulnerable populations. The Trump administration, led by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., estimated that barring illegal immigrants from such programs could redirect $374 million to citizens, highlighting a broader push to curb benefits for those in the country unlawfully. In a significant move to bolster public safety, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement conducted a week-long operation from August 17th to the 23rd in southeast Texas, arresting 822 criminal aliens, including 5 transnational gang members, 7 child predators, and 3 individuals convicted of homicide-related offenses. The operation focused on removing dangerous offenders, such as MS-13 gang members and repeat immigration violators, who have exploited border vulnerabilities to commit heinous crimes. ICE officials emphasized their commitment to protecting communities from cartel-linked crime and illegal re-entry, with 330 of those arrested previously ordered removed from the U.S. This targeted enforcement underscores the necessity of strong immigration policies to safeguard American neighborhoods from foreign criminals. In a significant victory for fiscal responsibility, a federal appeals court ruled 2-1 on September 2nd that the Environmental Protection Agency, under Administrator Lee Zeldin, can legally rescind $16 billion in climate grants allocated through the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. The decision overturns a lower court's injunction by U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan, which had blocked the EPA from reclaiming funds awarded to nonprofits like Climate United Fund, citing concerns over transparency, potential fraud, and misalignment with agency priorities. The ruling reinforces the EPA's authority to ensure taxpayer dollars are managed prudently, though environmental groups vow to continue their legal fight, potentially escalating the case to the Court of Federal Claims or seeking an en banc hearing. This development underscores the ongoing tension between environmental initiatives and fiscal oversight, with the court affirming the government's interest in safeguarding public funds from mismanagement. The Trump administration, led by Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, has proposed revoking a Biden-era public lands rule that emphasized conservation over development, aiming to unlock vast tracts of federal land for drilling, mining, logging, and grazing. This move aligns with President Trump's energy dominance agenda, seeking to bolster American energy production and support communities dependent on resource-based livelihoods. Critics, including environmental groups, argue the rule's repeal undermines the 1976 Federal Lands Policy Management Act's conservation mandates, while supporters, including industry leaders, praise it as a correction to restrictive policies that hindered economic activity. Burgum asserts the repeal will restore balance, ensuring access to millions of acres for multiple uses, from energy production to recreation, safeguarding the American way of life. In a recent address, Microsoft's AI CEO, Mustafa Suleyman, warned against the notion of granting legal rights to artificial intelligence, labeling it a dangerous and misguided endeavor that could undermine human autonomy and societal stability. Speaking at an industry conference, Suleyman argued that AI, while a powerful tool, lacks the moral agency and consciousness necessary for rights, and such a move could lead to unintended consequences, including diminished accountability for human developers and users. He emphasized the need for robust ethical frameworks and regulatory oversight to ensure AI serves humanity without blurring the lines of personhood. This perspective aligns with growing conservative concerns about preserving human sovereignty in the face of rapidly advancing technology, urging caution against progressive pushes to anthropomorphize machines. Mexico's decision to raise tariffs on automobiles from China and other Asian nations to 50% signals a strategic move to protect its domestic industries and curry favor with the United States, which has long pressed Latin American allies to curb China's economic influence. The overhaul, impacting $52 billion in imports, including textiles and steel, aims to safeguard 325,000 manufacturing jobs while addressing Mexico's growing trade deficit with China, which hit $120 billion last year. Economy Minister Marcelo Ebrard emphasized the need for protection against unfairly priced Chinese cars flooding the market, a sentiment echoed by analysts who see this as a pragmatic response to U.S. pressure and a defense of Mexico's industrial backbone ahead of a critical trade agreement review with the U.S. and Canada next year. Critics, however, warn that such tariffs could spike inflation, potentially disrupting Mexico's economic stability. Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, has erupted into violent unrest as the Nepal army took control following days of protests sparked by a government ban on social media platforms and widespread frustration over entrenched corruption. The situation escalated after Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigned, with parliament and other government buildings set ablaze by enraged demonstrators, primarily Gen Z youths, decrying economic stagnation and elite privilege. At least 22 people have been killed, with the army now patrolling the streets and politicians fleeing by helicopter to escape mob violence. The social media ban, briefly lifted after public outcry, was the tipping point for a populace fed up with a corrupt ruling class, highlighting the dangers of government overreach and the failure to address systemic economic issues in a nation where remittances prop up over 30% of GDP. South Sudan's first Vice President Riek Machar faced charges of murder, treason and crimes against humanity following his alleged role in a March 2025 militia attack by the White Army, which killed over 250 soldiers in Nasir in the Upper Nile state. The accusations, announced by Justice Minister Joseph Jeng Akich, intensify the long-standing rivalry with President Salva Kiir, threatening the fragile 2018 peace deal that ended a brutal civil war claiming 400,000 lives. Machar, under house arrest since March, is accused of orchestrating the attack, which involved gross violations of international humanitarian law, including desecration of corpses and attacks on civilians. International concerns mount as the detention risks plunging the world's youngest nation back into conflict, with 20 others, including former Petroleum Minister Puat Kang Kaul, also indicted. Critics question the timing and fairness of the charges, fearing a politicized trial could further destabilize South Sudan's precarious unity government. Press freedom worldwide has sunk to its lowest point in half a century, with government increasingly stifling journalists through censorship, economic pressure, and outright violence, according to recent studies. A report from the Stockholm-based International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance highlights sharp declines in countries like Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, and Myanmar, where authoritarian regimes have crushed independent media. The Reporters Without Borders 2025 World Press Freedom Index notes a critical low in the economic indicator, pointing to insidious financial tactics used to silence dissent. This erosion of free speech threatens the ability of citizens to hold power accountable, a cornerstone of any free society, as government interventions and disinformation campaigns grow unchecked.
You're listening to Underground USA News.